It's funny what sticks with you. One of my earliest memories is a conversation with my dad. I might have been about 4 or 5 years old, and I was visiting him at his office at his law firm. It was in a big, tall building, and you needed to ride an elevator to the 37th floor. I can remember the office. It was dark wood paneling and burgundy carpeting. You could just tell that important things happened there. And one day, as I was visiting him, I was sitting in his tall desk chair with my feet dangling far off the floor, organizing the paper clips in his desk drawer. And I said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I want to do what you do. I want to work in a place like this. I want to be a secretary." And I remember my dad coming around from the other side of his desk and sitting on a chair next to me, and this is what he said. He said, "Being a secretary is really wonderful work. Our secretaries are some of the best people I know. They keep this place running, and we would fall apart without them. Now, your mother and I want you all to go to university, and when you're finished with that, if you want to be a secretary, we'll support you in that. But did you know that you could be a lawyer?" As a matter of fact, I did not. There were no women lawyers in my dad's firm at the time. But his words opened up a new window in my imagination, and for years, that dream stuck. I could see myself as a lawyer. I never did go to law school, but years later, as a student in a Roman Catholic seminary, there was something I couldn't quite put my finger on, and I would recall that early conversation. "Did you know that women can be lawyers?" And at a certain point, I started to wonder, if women can be lawyers, can women be priests too? Our calling, our vocation, isn't something we discover all by ourselves. It's something that happens in relationship, in conversation with others. People who, knowingly or not, help us to imagine something new for ourselves, and then challenge and encourage us to grow into that new thing. Jesus knew this. He called some people together in community: Simon and Andrew, James and John. These were fishermen, a big trade in Galilee. They had a family business with their dad, and they were managers. They had hired hands. But Jesus called them out of what was familiar and into something new. He captured their imaginations with an unusual image. "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Jesus often did that. He told parables, strange stories that you really had to listen to and sit with. He often spoke about the kingdom of God. What's that? Well, it's like a mustard seed, or like leaven in dough, or like treasure hidden in a field. Clear as mud? How about "I will make you fish for people"? What on earth could that mean? It might help us to imagine how people caught fish back then. Probably not like we think of it now. When I think of catching fish, I imagine a rod with a line and a hook at the end of it with some bait on it. And when the fish takes the bait, you reel it in. But back then in Jesus' day, you caught fish with nets, circular nets with weights around the edges. You could stand on the shore and cast your net, or you could drop it in the water from a boat. Either way, it was hard, back-breaking work. Maybe this is what Jesus saw in those first disciples when he said, "Follow me." Maybe he knew that their work had trained them in strength, patience, persistence. Maybe he saw something in them that they'd never seen in themselves. And when he said, "I will make you fish for people," maybe he opened up a new window in their imaginations. I wonder what it cost them to follow Jesus. Surely their income took a hit when they quit fishing. What about their family commitments? And what about those broken nets? Was it a relief to leave those behind? Or did a quiet panic begin to rise in their throats with every step they took without the tools of their trade? Though Matthew tells us that they immediately followed Jesus, I wonder how long it took them to really grow into their new reality. We know that Peter and James and John would come to form an inner circle around Jesus, and they would absorb his teachings and witness his healings. And after some time of traveling together, Jesus would send them out to share the good news of the kingdom of heaven come near. We also know that they were far from perfect. Jesus called James and John the sons of thunder because of their quick tempers. They argued about who was the greatest, and they jockeyed for hypothetical position on either side of Jesus in his glory. Peter, he was entrusted with the keys of the kingdom, and yet he would deny Jesus 3 times. None of them managed to stay awake with Jesus in the garden. And yet, it was to all of these, obtuse, easily distracted, and only occasionally reliable, it was to all of these that the future of the Jesus movement was entrusted. The same movement brings us here today, somehow linking us to them. We're learning to follow Jesus too. And it sort of begs the question, if they could fish for people, could we, in all of our imperfections, could we maybe fish for people too? I love this saying of Mother Teresa: "Joy is a net of love by which you can catch souls." Joy is a net of love by which you can catch souls. Isn't that marvelous? What I mean by joy here is something that runs deeper than mere happiness or pleasure. Joy is richer, it's more textured. It's the sort of thing that can cast everything in a new light. It can transform everything, even our deepest fears and sorrows. I don't believe we discover joy alone. I believe that joy happens in a catchy sort of way. When you commit to living from that deep place of gift and gratitude, that can resonate with the gift and gratitude in me that's just waiting to be called forth. Joy is a net, sometimes a broken net, in which joy and adversity are bound together. In John's gospel, we hear Jesus say, "You will have pain, but your pain will turn to joy." Not long ago, I had the privilege of being present with a family in their home as the palliative care doctor visited their loved one for the first time. I watched as the doctor entered the room and as he approached the anxious huddle around the person lying in bed. And the doctor set down his bag and introduced himself, first to the patient and then to each person in the room, smiling behind his mask and making eye contact with each one of them. This is what he said: "You know, when people hear palliative care, a lot of different things can come to mind. But I invite you to think of me as your quality of life doctor, quality of life. The end of life, like the beginning, is a process, a transition, and I'm here to support all of you in that process. He listened carefully to the patient's history, and after a while said, "Here are some tools that I can offer you to respond to any pain or anxiety she might have." Then he left space for questions, and he answered each person with kindness and encouragement. He pulled out a business card and he explained, "This is how you reach me during the day. This is how you reach me after hours. You can always reach someone from my group. We are here to walk with you." And as he gathered up his things to leave the room, the last thing he did was turn to the patient, and he bowed to her, and he said, "It will be my honor to serve you." And just like that, this gifted soul had entered a room crowded with worry and grief, and he opened a window into a new space, a space of joy and comfort and trust, and he drew everyone into that space with him. When was the last time you saw someone living their gifts and being so completely themselves that it drew you in and made you want to be a part of it? The child digging in the sand, fascinated by its endlessness. The band that gets you humming along and tapping your feet without you even realizing it. The crossing guard or the barista whose greeting lifts your spirits in the morning. It might be someone excelling in their professional skill, or it might be someone immersed in a relational vocation of parenting or caregiving. Just someone sharing their gifts with gratitude and generosity. Keep an eye out for those people. The people who pull us in with their net of joy. And pay attention to what it calls forth from you. The wonder, the gratitude, maybe even a challenge. And allow that shift to take hold in you, to guide you, maybe even transform you. This is God's power working in us and through us and all around us. These are little glimpses of the kingdom of God. Did you know that we can fish for people with our nets of joy? We can, and we do. Thanks be to God.